Yay! The Shanae show is over. We can all breathe a sigh of relief. Or shall we say, drink 2 bottles of champagne at once.
Here, Genevieve.
Please make sure to subscribe to my channel and leave your comments. Ring the bell to get notified when a new episode is up. But in today's episode, season 6 of Clayton's journey, it's all about communication. What not to do and what to do instead. Hi, welcome back. One of the reasons I follow The Bachelor is to point out as real examples as I can what is good communication. Now, I know that the show is highly edited, but when it comes to communication skills, you need examples of what works in real-term relationships and what doesn't. And The Bachelor is the show that keeps giving us examples of what not to do, especially this season. But when it comes to dating and relationship success, nothing is more important than your communication style. I think of people in 2 different categories, low and high expressive types. What does that mean to be low or high expressive? For those of you who don't know me, I'm a psychologist and an expert in attachment styles. I also developed a love style quiz, and on my quiz I measure attachment styles, but I also measure your communication style. And together, these 2 things make up what I call your love style. Because while you might have an anxious attachment style, you're also going to be either high or low expressive. An example of someone who's high expressive would be Shanae, and someone who's low expressive would be Serene. Now, the classic response to figure out what type you are is in a situation where there is conflict, for instance. Are you the type of person where you have to express yourself immediately, like you hate going to bed angry? If that's you, then you're a high expressive person. You want to get it out. You want to solve problems. But the low expressive person would rather avoid talking about things, like maybe things will just get better if I sweep them under the rug. Let's not talk about it. Who does this sound like? I want you to start using this lens in how you look at people in this episode. All right. So now let's go to where episode 6 starts with Genevieve and Shanae on the 2-on-1. Who do you think Genevieve is? Now, to me, Genevieve looks like a low expressive type. Why? The poor thing is practically shaking under the stress.
This week has been tough, especially finding out about the 2-on-1.
When she's talking with Clayton, she talks about how hard it is for her. Therefore, I think Genevieve is someone who would rather have avoided this conversation altogether. Now, juxtapose that with Shanae, who I think is a very high expressive person. Shanae gets a rush out of having difficult conversations, right? She talks about how she rehearses, bring it on. She gets excited about this.
I'm not worried. I do have a plan and I got this.
Right? High expressive. Now, I'm not suggesting that being one type or the other is bad or good. Ideally, you want to actually be somewhere in the middle, and I have examples of those too. But more importantly, you have to know who your partner is or your audience is. And who do you think Clayton is? Yeah, Clayton's a low expressive type. I've been talking in previous episodes that I think Clayton has an anxious attachment style. He needs lots of validation from women, and we see that again in this episode. But you can also see that he gets flooded easily. He's a low expressive anxious type. This is the reason why he takes so many breaks, why he cancels the rose ceremony, why he gets up and leaves Sarah in this episode. Because Clayton, to me, feels a little bit like Ari. Do you remember in Ari's season where it looked like he was even having a panic attack in the middle of a date? He'd have to get up and say, "Excuse me," as I take a break. But we know that Clayton also grew up with one parent who listened to him and the other, his father, who was a tough love type of person. I don't get the feeling, and why this season is difficult, that Clayton's really comfortable with emotional affect, right? All right. So now, how do you think a low expressive person works with a high expressive person? Well, we've got lots of examples here. So at first, a low expressive type might be impressed with someone who's really good with their words. Think about it. Clayton is first impressed with Cassidy, right? Remember Cassidy from episode 1 and 2? She's a high expressive type. She's free with her words. Cassidy tells Clayton what he wants to hear. I'm here for you, Clayton. And Clayton's like, wow, this feels good, right? But it also got to be too much. Now, Shanae is the next high expressive type, right? I said it before that Shanae is fast in her speech. She gives Clayton so much feedback. It's like he can't help but believe her, and so he believes that she's telling the truth. Now, the bigger problem is that Shanae is also a highly anxious type, right? She gets upset with Elizabeth that Elizabeth isn't acknowledging her enough. She's not validating her. Shanae has a huge abandonment wound. And the anger that we see from Shanae is something in attachment styles we call anxious angry. What does that mean? It means that the person has a big abandonment wound, and when someone else is inconsistent with them, the way that Elizabeth was inconsistent with Shanae, she gets pissed. Now, the bigger problem is that immediately, right? First off, Clayton is kind of enamored with Shanae. She's also very attractive, and he's sort of wrapped up into his attraction. But remember, all the complaints that they have about everyone else, when you end up in a relationship with this person, they start complaining to you about you too. It's only a matter of time before they're going to have similar complaints about you. And I think Clayton's onto that finally now. So finally, Shanae's audition is over. But after the show, Shanae even doubles down further, defending her behavior, saying, at least I was real. I would love to coach Shanae on how to make amends and how to really do a sincere apology, but Shanae's not listening. And even if she does make it to paradise because she's alluding to something big coming up for her, sure, the producers find this attractive, but we'll see if the men do. Okay, so let's move on from Shanae and let's talk about the next high expressive type. And you know who I'm talking about. That's Mara. Now, Mara, the marinara sauce from New Jersey, she can talk about that she is your saucy girl and she's going to tell it to you straight. But if you notice Clayton's response to Mara, here's the problem, right? Mara communicates in a very negative way. In fact, the word Mara means bitter. And we see that complaining come out when Mara thinks she should get the group date, and she doesn't, and now she's one-on-one with Clayton.
But to get the last rose on the last rose ceremony and to not get a one-on-one, it's hard to still be giving that much because that is discouraging. I'm just a little surprised. You've been adamant about saying that you're looking for a wife and looking for children and long-term.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope.
That's the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the roses that are given out, the one-on-ones that are given out, don't reflect that. And to see that somebody is getting a second one-on-one where I have yet to get my one.
Okay.
Just, the women that you're directing your attention to. And it's, hey, again, it's your journey. But I'm going to speak my truth as I always have.
Watch Clayton's face, right? Hear Mara.
Okay. What is it specifically about these women that, that they're not here for a marriage?
Is telling Clayton, well, I thought you wanted someone who was sweet, who was ready for marriage, and I'm doing all of those things, and you still didn't validate me. Okay, we already know, Mara, the script doesn't work, right? She doesn't use her time wisely with Clayton to talk about their relationship. Instead, she throws Sarah under the bus. And it's no different than Shanae ruining Elizabeth's journey. Mara now is ruining Sarah's journey. But she wants to differentiate herself as being serious, more serious than Sarah. But she does so at another woman's expense. And to that, it's a big no for me. Now, she also does something, which I'm not sure we're going to find out the truth here, is Mara claims that Sarah said she wasn't ready for marriage. And I'm not sure if we're going to find out if that's actually true or not. But also not cool. Now, the other thing that felt off that was Mara was that she was complaining and again suggesting that all the ways that she was acting, that she did it for something. That's not how relationships work, right? Because I'm saying that I'm being nice and all of these things, and I expect something. So there's an expectation from Mara, and clearly Clayton's getting the feeling that he's not doing it right. I would love to give you an example of how I think Mara could have handled that 100 times better. Are you ready for it? Okay, obviously now I'm Mara. Clayton, thank you for asking how I'm doing. That's so sweet of you. More importantly, how are you doing? I can imagine what a hard week this has been for you. But thank you. I'm so glad you asked, because as this process goes on, it's getting harder and harder for me. I feel so connected to you on our group dates, but I feel like I really need more one-on-one time with you to open up. So honestly, I guess I'm just feeling a bit discouraged with the process, and I'm sure you can relate. I really would just love more uninterrupted time with you. So my advice to Mara, and if you're a high expressive person, is to share less, not more. And also be very clear about what it is that you want and what you need. So oftentimes you've probably heard the term caring is sharing, right? And anxious people will think, well, I need to share with my partner everything. I need to tell them how I feel. Otherwise, in some ways, it feels like you're being deceptive. But Mara shares too much with Clayton. She shares too much of the negativity, and she doesn't realize that she's coming at him in such a way that sounds really disapproving of him. Because timing is crucial in your relationship, especially in the beginning, and you'd have to know that your partner cares enough about you to want to know everything that you think and feel. And when it comes to Mara and Clayton, they're not there yet. Clayton doesn't want to make Mara happy. Why? Because there isn't enough of a foundation yet. But he's hearing more flack from Mara about how he's feeling. Now, if Clayton was another high expressive person, he might have heard Mara's message differently. But because he's low expressive, and remember, pay attention to your audience, Clayton shuts down. You can see the look on his face. He's like, who are you talking about? He's trying to get to the gist of it. But he doesn't care about Mara in that situation. He's just simply trying to get information. And it feels like Mara's demanding more one-on-one time. It doesn't feel like a request or like an ask. So my prediction is that Mara is going to go home soon. Not because she's the oldest, as she's claiming, but because she's negative and she has expectations of Clayton. Okay, and she lets Clayton know how disappointing he's been to her. A bigger piece of advice that I want to give all women is that by telling someone how they're screwing up with you, they may not be more incentivized to actually fix it, right? Okay, so if that's me and I'm getting feedback that I'm hurting you, what is my option? I can either believe you and think that I'm a real jerk, or I can see it as an issue with you, that you're too emotional or that you expect too much. So in this scenario, which one do you think Clayton's going to pick? That he's an asshole for disappointing Mara, or that she's too much? I said it. All right. Next, let's move on to Sarah. Now, Clayton doesn't do a great job in when he's talking to Sarah. And what Clayton does is create a lot more insecurity in Sarah that I don't actually think is necessary. It's a big no for me on how Clayton handles this situation. Because Clayton starts out the night with Sarah, and also we didn't see a daytime portion of that date, so I'm thinking this was just a fill-in evening kind of dinner date. He sounds almost angry. Like, I got this information from someone and I need to know, are you ready to be engaged? That's not the right way to handle the situation. Because Clayton then also drops this bomb with Sarah to make her feel bad, and then he walks away.
Excuse me.
And I can imagine, even if Sarah was the most secure of people, that would really make you anxious. And now poor Sarah is thinking, oh my gosh, who said this about me? And it creates a whole other dynamic. While Clayton does say thank you for being vulnerable, I'm confused and I'm scared and I need to step away. Now, in a more perfect world, how might Clayton would handle this situation differently? Well, first off, he wouldn't hide behind someone else's feedback. Okay, so now I'm Clayton, and imagine that I'm talking to Sarah. Clayton might have said something like this. Sarah, thanks for coming out. You know how much I like you, and we have a strong connection. But as we're getting more serious, I don't know, I'm just getting nervous. I want to check in with you and see where you are. This is a big commitment. And I appreciate that you've been really validating, and I know that you're into me. But I want to know if you think you could see yourself engaged or married at the end of this process. I know you're 23, and at your age, I didn't think I was ready either. But share with me where you are, because we're getting close to hometowns, and I just wanted to have more time with you. So I get it. I know that the film is rolling and it's really hard for Clayton, but can you imagine how much better Sarah would have felt if she didn't have to think who was throwing her name out there, but also get straight to the question, are you ready for what I'm ready for? Okay. Now, also imagine that if we had two high expressive people, then that would be a different combination too. But here we have Sarah, who's I think a low expressive person, and we have Clayton, who's a low expressive person, and you can see that no one's really kind of advancing that conversation. Okay, what can we learn as a bigger takeaway around this? So one, if you are a high expressive person, if you take my love style quiz and you're a nervous Nora or you're an independent Isabel, but you're a high expressive type, I want you to ask yourself, am I being direct enough? Am I tending to be more complaining? Or am I asking directly for what I need, but also am I listening? So sometimes remember that caring is sharing less, toning it down and considering who is receiving this message. Now, if you're the low expressive type, if you are like Serene even, because I think she's a better example of a low expressive type, you have to ask yourself then, do I need to be bad sooner? This is a technique that I teach people how to be. Because if I'm the low expressive person, I grew up in a family understanding that expressing things was not safe. So when I have to dig deep and get vulnerable with someone, it feels like I'm being bad. That I'm expressing something because I don't know how safe it's going to be for my message to land. So my advice is to quote unquote be bad sooner. Meaning that if you hold on to so much negativity, it's bound to build resentment in you. And you know, when you suppress something, it shows up even more. So the practice is learning how to share your truth and your vulnerability sooner and in little ways to make it not feel like it's such a big message. Get used to it. It only feels bad at the beginning because you're just not used to it. But over time, a partner's going to want to know how you feel and think. And they're not going to know You can't expect them to be a mind reader. All right, so this week I want to do something a little bit different too. I want to start giving out what I have as my crown for behaviors that I think are good. And I think we actually have two communication styles that were really good, Rachel and Susie. Now, Rachel, she's in a good sweet spot. We already know that Clayton is really falling for her. And she communicates in perfect timing that she's falling hard for Clayton. And I think this was really what Clayton needed. Did you notice Clayton? He actually takes a sigh of relief. Finally, the journey's working. Again, another sign that I think he's anxious. And then Susie arranges a surprise date. Help me. I'm sure she went to the producers and asked them to help her. And you can see that Clayton, of course, he goes to the clock tower not knowing who the heck it's going to be. Is it going to be Shanae? Is it going to be Mara? Is he in trouble? And so he's so relieved that it's Susie that you can just see him relax. But Susie does a lovely job. Did you notice? She checked in with Clayton.
How are you feeling?
She's very sweet. And in the promo piece that she shows that she's feeling kind of behind. But she takes the risk and she's vulnerable, a good sign of communication, that she tells Clayton specifically that she's falling for him and that she feels scared. And he is endeared to her. So I want to use this example for both women and give out two crowns. What is good communication? It's telling your partner that you care about them, that you feel about them, but you're also expressing your own vulnerability and saying, I trust you to know how I feel. I hope that's a good takeaway about what we can learn in terms of improving communication styles in your own life too. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and do you like my wigs or not? All right, thanks.